Of 15 minutes for the presentation.
Thank you. Now my microphone is on. Before I load my presentation file, I just try to welcome all of the participants in this room. And then the main purpose of my presenting on this issue on the Green New Deal is because it seems like this is one of the new fashion at the global level in the context of how we can further utilize already existing the efforts to address climate change under the Paris Agreement, in order to better address the COVID-19 recovery issues. So in the sense that I do hope that even if it's going to be brief, my presentation will help you better understand how CRG can be better used to deal with COVID-19 recovery plans. Let me just load my presentation file. So let me just go through my presentation file as quickly as possible. Okay. So it's a Green New Deal in Korea, status play and its implication for developing countries. Actually, original version of this presentation goes back to the early, I think, as I recall, the May, when the UNDP Seoul Policy Center actually invited me to give a presentation first time, possibly within Korea, about this idea. And this is a sort of the updated version based on my initial presentation that I gave before by reflecting some of the further progress made within Korea. So here, you need to understand very briefly about the history of climate change policy of Korea. It goes back to the year 2008 to 2012, when the former President Lee Myung-bak administration launched the so-called low-carbon green growth policy. Many of you heard about, Global Green Growth Institute, and then the green growth policy, and then the other related terms. And then it was first time in Korea for Korea to use the term during the Lee Myung-bak administration. And this is the time when actually climate change issues was successfully mainstreamed within the context of the Korean policy. And then this is a time when the Korean government, together with other partner countries and organizations and then experts, established the Global Green Growth Institute and also hosted the GCF. And then next administration by the former President Park Geun-hye, they focused on rather more like a technology-based issues, ICT and other green technologies under the policy of creative economy. And then now, current Moon Jae-in government from the 2017, Moon Jae-in administration introduced a so-called energy transition policy to a large extent. And then they also tries to promote the renewable energy in this context. Also because of some of the regional air pollution problems in Northeast Asia, they put a lot of emphasis on handling the air pollution matters as well. So there is a continuity in the Korean context in terms of how this climate change policy has been in the middle of the government implementation of the policies under the Paris Agreement. And then now, let me talk briefly about the concept of the Green New Deal. This concept appeared not first time at this time. Actually, it goes back to the year 2007 and 8, when the entire global society faced the global financial crisis started by the bankruptcy of the Lehman Brothers in the United States. And then mostly at the time that measures discussed under the concept of the Green New Deal were about fiscal stimulus packages. And then, as I stated here, it was largely successful, but didn't lead to significant greening of the economy, actually. And then the main venue to discuss about this idea of the Green New Deal was through the G20 at the time. So it was a successful first attempt to address the sort of the stimulus, plans in order to address some of the global financial challenges, and then mainly through G20. But there was some question whether or not it was really helpful to green the the economy itself. And now we comes to the 2020, suddenly we have to respond to the impact of the COVID-19. And then here, there are similarities, but there are also differences between the 2007 and 8 and the 2020. Stimulus and recovery plans now needs to focus on a new, more sustainable, and here important term, inclusive and resilient economic model, supporting a so-called just transition from our current pattern of economic activity. So a big difference between the 2007 and 8 version and now is that it tend to emphasize more on the inclusiveness and resilience of the aspects. And then if you are interested in following up how this concept has evolved, and one of the first starting point in the promoting Green New Deal idea at this time was in Europe from last year. And then even within the Europe, this just transition seems to be one of the guiding, term in order to put more emphasis on the equity and inclusiveness issues. In the case of the G20, for instance, then because health, COVID-19, of course, health issue is very, very important. And another important issue that we are talking about at the G20 level is the digital, because it will help the people to deal with some of the new normal situation at this time. Of course, all the time, the green is one of the main pillars, even in G20. Here, overall, another difference between the Green New Deal in 2007 and 8 and now is that at the time in 2007, the significant impact was given to the mostly and more developed world, but whereas COVID-19, actually there is no exception, no matter whether you are the rich or the poor. So in that sense that the developing countries became more vulnerable to this global impact under the COVID-19. So there is more need to assist the developing countries even at the global level. And then Korea Green New Deal recovery plans, it first started in May this year by the announcement of the President Moon. And then he said that Green New Deal will be included together with the Digital New Deal as a recovery plans. And it was the first time that when the Korean government actually mentioned about the Green New Deal by the president. Before this announcement, there were some, indications that the Korea might focus on green to a large extent by some of the international, speeches by the environment minister at the international level. Also, some of the strong indications by the ruling party, which emphasized a lot about necessary for the Green New Deal. So overall, Korea, even if it didn't prepare for the details on the Green New Deal before, but it has been moving very quickly to realize all these plans into real actions. I'm sorry that I'm just showing you some Korean, character only. I had a hard time in visualizing this again in English, but let me just explain to you. So here, the vision is that by utilizing this Green New Deal policy, Korea has a vision of becoming a global leader. Right? This is, sort of the vision of the Korea, New Deal policy. Korea New Deal policy has two segments, as I indicated. One is digital, the other one is green. So we have two pillars under the Green New Deal policy. And then there is a social safety net is very, very important to put placed in place. And then the financial support and institutional supports are necessary. And this is some of the details of 10 major projects that this government would like to engage in the context of the New Deal. New Deal, once again in Korea, includes Digital New Deal and Green New Deal. And then now today's presentation of mine focuses on Green New Deal. And then in order to make this idea in place, government developed some of the inter-ministerial coordination, mechanism under the president. So it seems like they are working so far pretty well in Korea. So there are new ideas, and then there is a support of the government mechanism to coordinate all different kinds of the actions by different ministries. A little bit more details on the Green New Deal. This is the identified main areas that the Korean government would like to put the emphasis on. By 2025, Korean government committed to put 70 billion US dollars, thereby creating 659,000 new jobs. And then in terms of the CO2 emissions, it is committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 1.2 million tons of the CO2. This is about 20% of the reduction relative to the target of the 2025 that the Korean government has. It's a pretty aggressive and then ambitious, actually, plan that Korean government is committing. So there are several zero energy public facilities. So buildings are very, very important in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So Korean government put some of the detailed plans on buildings like greening smart schools. If you go to Korean school buildings, they are pretty outdated. So government would like to take this chance actually to remodel the school buildings so that they can become green smart. According to their term. And then green economy recovery plans. And here, 25 cities will be formulated, developed under the concept of smart green cities. Renewables is also key area to promote. So aggressive deployment of solar wind powers are expected to happen. Thereby, their portion will be current 12 gigatons to 42 gigatons in year 2025. Intelligent power meters will be installed in almost every household. And then green mobility is also important area, such as electric vehicle and hydrogen vehicle is important for us to consider. And then green industry, green industry, 1.9 billion green loans will be provided to promote all these good efforts. And then the 5 green multi-clusters and 10 smart industrial complexes, and then 1,750 clean factories will be developed. So green technology-wise, CCUS, this is a carbon capture and then storage and then the utilization technologies will be put in place. These are the main areas that the Korean government have identified through the different ministries. And some of the details, I don't want to go to the details, but one of the key issues that within Korean context is that how to phase out the coal power plants in this juncture. So this shows you that how it will be handled in Korea. It's a very challenging target to phase out the coal power plants, but there is no way for us, for Korea, to avoid that. And then this will be more actively pursued under the in the context of the Green New Deal policy in Korea. Hydrogen economy, once again, Korean motor industry has developed, promoted electric vehicle, and now they are focusing also on the manufacturing hydrogen vehicles as well. So if you want to drive hydrogen vehicle, is available in Seoul, and you can get quite a good amount of subsidies from the government actually to purchase this vehicle. And however, there are challenges. Still, there is a little bit of the question whether or not the climate change policy has been mainstreamed, because these are the good areas to focus on. But in terms of the detailed calculations on how much CO2 emissions can be reduced in implementing every single policy area. So this is still a little bit questionable. So I would think that the mainstream climate policy still needs to be further strengthened in Korea. Interministerial coordination, so far as I indicated, it looks okay, but further strength needs to be made, especially between the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Energy in Korea, actually to generate the synergy effects under the strong leadership of the president. That seems to be very, very critical. Need for a more active role in international cooperation. I say cautiously within the Korea that this is the weakest point of the Korean Green New Deal policy now. For instance, among the relevant ministries, I don't see that participation of Minister of Foreign Affairs, for instance. And that Korea used to be a trading country in the world that has been the driving force of the growing economy in Korea. So from the beginning, even Korean Green New Deal policy needs to be international. And then, for instance, by strengthening the cooperation between Korea and Ethiopia in the context of the strengthening the Green New Deal policy, I think it will bring the good mutual benefits to both Korea and Ethiopia, for instance, and then in developing countries in general. This is somewhat the point that I'd like to further emphasize even here that my government, I hope, would like to take a little bit more seriously. And then, of course, the role of the stakeholders, is also important. So governments and the relevant think tanks and organizations and experts, of course, the civil society is important, and the private sectors. All these stakeholders needs to participate in implementing Korean Green New Deal policy. Lessons for developing countries. Number one, this is my suggestions for Ethiopia. Climate change can be a main driver of post-COVID-19 recovery plan. So stick on the CRGE and modify it a little bit more or utilize it in order to identify the better chances actually to promote the jobs and getting funding not only from the inside or outside. Mainstreaming climate policy in that sense is very, very important. Aligning national green recovery plans with international initiatives, such as UNS's process, is very, very helpful, not only to develop appropriate national plans, but also to secure more resources from outside. Once again, as I indicated, G20, UN, and some other global fora, other than main fora, where all these new ideas start to be developed. And once you put your feet in those fora, then it will only help developing countries to have a better access to possible existing opportunities. So please align your domestic actions with international initiatives as well. Resilience, equality, and adaptations are important. However, don't forget reducing GHG emissions is also important. So when you develop your green recovery plan in the context of climate change, not only adaptation, but also thinking about the mitigation component is very, very important. So I showed you lastly, Ethiopia, this is your CRGE. So I already indicated that in case of another country like Botswana, this is the outcome of the study that I carried out with my student, that most of them are about institutional governance matters. So in other words, that ensuring political interest and formulating the very efficient supporting governance and institutional framework, and putting the good contents. These will be very, very critical elements for developing countries to best utilize the concept of the Green New Deal idea. And once again, this will ensure that strengthening your capacity to address not only COVID-19, but also help your country to better identify the path for the sustainable growth after COVID-19 problem ends. So this is the end of my presentation. And then if you need any further information, you can just email me. I provided my email address here. So thank you very much. Thank you, Jiyoon.